one of the things that that has a powerful influence on whether they're willing to act is their opinion of whether other people are willing to act. Because that's what you don't know. You may know you're dissatisfied. You may know this regime is never going to change. You may know it's up to us. But you don't want to be the only person out there, right? Because not only would it be embarrassing and ineffective, but it would be dangerous.
Absolutely.
So how do you find out what other people are willing to do? How do you find out what lots of other people are thinking at the same time? Well, in that situation, I think the internet might make a big difference because social media being so effective at horizontal communication, not state to citizens, right? Or citizens to state, which is what I call vertical communication.
Yeah.
But horizontal communication, meaning across the society, citizen to citizen, peer to peer, student to student. Because the internet's so good at that, and we have all these tools, but the main tool is the internet itself. It's not any particular service, right? Can imagine that having a big effect. However, I also think something else, and I wrote about this at my blog. You can find it. When we argue about things like, is this a Twitter revolution?
Yeah.
You know, is this the Facebook revolution?
Sure.
Several things are going on there. One is the headline writers are kind of out of control, you know, because that usually that's a headline. It's a way of putting kind of a sexy twist on events, right? And it's of course it's an exaggeration, but all headlines are exaggerations, right?
Yeah.
So then what happens is that you get these headlines, Egypt's Twitter revolution, you know, and then you get people who, hi Mitch, who are reacting to those headlines as if they're serious truth claims, when actually they're not. Right?
Do you think in some sense it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that once you draw the attention to that, it brings more people's awareness to it and they begin to use it, and so in some sense the media might draw people?
No, I think what's happening is more. I don't know. I don't know how much that dynamic plays out. But let me just finish what I'm saying.
Sure.
So you have this weird argument mostly back here in the United States and in the Western countries of how much of a role do these technologies play. Meanwhile, the people on the ground, you know, in Iran and Tunisia and Egypt, they're not thinking about that. They're trying to, like, win their rights, right? And if we're interested in the role that the internet plays in such events, if we're seriously interested in that, as opposed to arguing about is this a Twitter revolution or debunking the notion of a Twitter revolution, right? Then I think the challenge is we just need to know a lot more. We need to know a lot more than we know now. So we have to find out, well, exactly how did people organize events like the revolt in Egypt? Exactly how did people in Tunisia find out what was going on? Exactly how did those who were the mobilizers, and there always are mobilizers, how did they communicate with the people they were mobilizing? That's an empirical question. That requires reporting, right? It requires research. And to sort of argue about it in the absence of that knowledge, of really concrete, detailed, patient, factual reconstruction of events is really hard. You know, it's kind of absurd. Now, we do have the testimony of participants, people who were involved, who can tell us, you know, Facebook was really important to what we were doing. The problem is that they may say that, and then some headline writer or feature writer here says, Twitter revolution, and then we're off arguing again about something that is really overdrawn in the first place, and the criticisms of it are overdrawn as well. So when people ask me, well, what role do you think the internet played? Mm-hmm. I tell them what I just told you, which is it's this argument about Twitter revolutions is really a distraction, and we really need a lot of research to know the answer to that. But it stands to reason that this horizontal effect could be significant, especially on this question of how do I know other people will join me if I take the risk of political action?
So clearly more and more people are finding access to the internet and communicating via the internet, but there's also this push from big corporations to really limit people's control on the internet, like Comcast and the big providers here in the U.S. And obviously you see it in Egypt when they just pull all the ISPs and the entire internet is down. Who do you think has there's obviously no one answer to this, and it's kind of impossible to answer practically, but who has control of the internet? It's just this entity almost that...
Well, it would be nice to say no one has control of the internet, and it was kind of built that way so that it couldn't be controlled. And there are several important properties of the internet as a system that make that sort of true. For example, there's no headquarters for the internet. If somebody said, okay, internet, take me to your leader, there's nowhere to take them because there's no central office, which isn't true, say, of the Pentagon, right? Or if we said to AT&T, okay, AT&T, take me to your leader, they would take you to the CEO of AT&T, sure. Right? But there's no CEO of the internet, and there's no headquarters, and it's a decentralized structure. What the internet actually is, a lot of people who use it don't understand what it is. What it is essentially a series of protocols for linking computers together, mm-hmm. Right? So where is that? Where does that reside? Right? Well, it resides in the network. So in that sense, nobody owns the internet. However, in order for the internet as it stands to actually work, there are a lot of players involved. And because there are a lot of big players involved who can be subjected to pressures of one kind or another, real or imagined, there are a lot of weak points in the system. And especially with WikiLeaks and to some degree the experiences in Egypt, we see what some of those weaknesses are. Internet service providers are big ones because they are companies that stand between the user and the internet and can be convinced to do certain things that the government wants them to do. But they're not the only ones. Service providers like Amazon, which is now a server company, can cut you off if they decide that you're violating their terms of service. The terms of service themselves are part of the problem because nobody can actually read those and actually understand them. That's the whole point of them, right? Another really important player are the companies that are known as domain name servers, DNS systems. And what they do is they take the address that you type into the internet, like presslink.org, and they transform that into essentially a number that the computer can understand of where to send that traffic, right? So just that little part has been well known for many years as a potential weak spot, right? But nobody knew, come on, is somebody going to really pressure a domain name server company to actually shut down an address? I mean, that would be suicide for that company. That would never happen. That's what we used to say, right? And then with WikiLeaks, that exact thing happened. Sure. So now we know that we have this decentralized system. It is without a CEO, without a headquarters, but it has a lot of weaknesses in practice. And Some of them come from the state. Some of them come from private companies. Some of them come just from a lack of integrity and courage. But we don't really have a free internet. If we were going to try and construct it, we would have to have a lot of institutions that we don't have now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the answer.
And obviously the internet's being used for so many different things than it was, 5-10 years ago. But in some sense it was more open back then when it was a new medium and less people were invested in it. Do you think it's business interests that, or simply just more authoritarian interests that have driven this open network into becoming increasingly closed?
Well, when you have a threat like WikiLeaks, which is potentially a threat to both corporations and governments, after all, they're supposedly sitting on documents that could deeply embarrass Bank of America, right? And they've already embarrassed the United States government. So when you have a threat, the danger comes from both. So governments want to control the internet. Companies don't stand up for the user the way they should. Corporations act in their interests. We always knew that. What we didn't know as much as we do now is just how deeply some of these companies are involved in the basic operations of the internet. And so now we don't really have an open web. We have a web that is dependent on a lot of players that we can't rely on. And that creates a new political situation, but it's a very dynamic one too, because internet freedom is something that people are willing to fight for. Like, it's sort of like if you take away their National Football League, they get mad. If you take away their video games, they get mad. If you take away their internet, it's not that hard to get them mad. It's a lot. It's not an abstract thing, and so I think it's a very explosive political thing. And when Egypt shut down the internet, I have a sense that historians in the future may see that as one of the critical mistakes the regime made. And it's not hard to see why. They, by doing that, signaled that this small band of protesters, determined opposition people, had created a genuine civic emergency, because only a civic emergency could trigger, right, the shutdown of the entire internet. It's like a power failure, or all the electricity going off, or all the trains stop, or all the cars stop working. So that, I think, gave the protesters much more momentum, and also said to all those other people that I was talking about earlier, wow, we've really got this regime scared and panicked, right? So what my friend Dave Weiner says is that we should rebuild the internet so that if they want to shut down any part of it, they have to shut down all of it, right? Because that actually would be a better situation. Because if they can just turn off this little corner, then that's a much more insidious form of control.
So you'd say like something that China, for example, is doing when they're just slowly and subtly tweaking search results, or
that's a lot more dangerous
than on or off.
Totally, yeah. And you don't even know they're doing it a lot of the times. But that also, I mean, that they think it's a sustainable pattern. I'm not sure it is, because every Chinese person who comes to realize that the government doesn't want the internet to be completely open has to start asking themselves, well, why is that? You know, and when they do, a little bit of the legitimacy of the regime evaporates. This is one of the mysteries of politics, is this question of legitimacy, that when states have no legitimacy, they're very weak, even though they may have all the guns and all the soldiers and all the power, right? And so how do you gain legitimacy? How do you lose legitimacy? Well, how you handle the internet has a huge effect on that. And that's what makes it so interesting for students of politics, is I think that, you know, legitimacy is a very elusive but also very real thing. And the internet is really good at exposing a lack of legitimacy. I got to run.
All right, great. I was just about to say I was done anyway. Thank you so much for your time.